This video contains frank discussion of the current wave of anti-transgender legislation. It also contains discussion of suicidal ideation and all forms of abuse. If you are in danger or in need of any kind of support, I urge you to please dial Trans Lifeline using this number, 877-565-8860. Once again, 877-565-8860. This hotline is staffed by transgender volunteers and not local law enforcement. You are loved. You are worth it. Please, if you need to seek help, seek help. So, I know you're all here for the cartoon videos and the TV history stuff. And I know what I'm about to talk about today is way, way different than what you're used to seeing from me. But as someone who has begun to realize that they are developing their own voice, their own platform, comes the responsibility to use it to spread awareness of important matters. As you all may know, I'm transgender. My pronouns are she, her. I'm making this video specifically for those who are not transgender, also known as cisgender, which is not a slur. While my brothers and sisters in the trans community are well aware of what's going on, I'm concerned that those outside our bubble aren't quite aware of this problem. In short, transgender people are in very real, very increasing danger throughout the United States. We are a very small minority. As of June 2022, 1.6 million people in the United States identify as transgender. That includes 1.3 million adults and 300,000 children. Note that this only includes people who have publicly identified in surveys as transgender. If you've noticed an increase in the population, well, that's because our existence is finally being normalized in meaningful ways. There are visible, openly transgender actors in Hollywood, such as Hunter Schafer and Elliot Page. Transgender artists like Nate Stevenson, Julia Kay, and May Dean have created works that explain and celebrate the transgender experience. These works gave many of us who only knew that something wasn't right the words to explain what was going on. And healthcare has been made more accessible than ever, thanks to the widespread adoption of informed consent and insurance companies starting to cover this treatment, which is very recent, only starting around 2016. And when we transition, we tend to stay transitioned. In a 2015 study of thousands of transgender people, only 8% reported ever having detransitioned. And of that 8%, 62% of those surveyed reported that they later retransitioned. The vast majority of those detransitioners reported that they did so due to external pressures from family, friends, or employers. It's not a phase. It's not an epidemic. We're here. We've always been here, and we're not going anywhere. Unfortunately, on networks like Fox News, social media platforms like X, the former Twitter, and most notably in Congress, state legislatures, and even school boards, an anti-trans moral panic has gripped conservatives. They complain about transgender women competing in women's sports and having an unfair advantage, despite that being rare. They express deep concern towards people who detransition, despite that also being rare, as you just saw. They are concerned that kids are having gender-affirming surgeries, even though that is virtually non-existent. And they're concerned that trans people are grooming and sexually assaulting minors, even though kids have far more reason to fear a priest than a drag queen. Because of all of this, we are being targeted. Trans people are in grave danger of losing their healthcare, of losing their rights as a human being, of even losing the ability to use the restroom that aligns with their gender identity. And this is not hypothetical. Many trans people have already lost rights, particularly transgender youth. In 2023, 550 bills were filed, most in states with Republican supermajorities, restricting the rights of transgender people. Yes, that was the correct number. 550. The end result are walls of red enveloping large parts of the country. This map concerning the rights of transgender kids by journalist Aaron Reed illustrates the severity of the problem. Those deep red states that you see, each one indicates a state that has restricted, or more likely completely outlawed, gender-affirming care for transgender youth. These kids, who in many cases know what gender they are being forced to go through puberties that do not align with that identity. These puberties wreak havoc on their minds and bodies. They're subject to policies that forcibly out them to their parents that may not be affirming. And within this dark landscape, so many feel like their only way out is through suicide. According to the Trevor Project's 2023 survey, 41% of LGBTQ youth attempted suicide. Amongst trans and non-binary youth, the numbers are even bleaker. Half of all trans and non-binary kids tried it. And the difference between trans kids who receive gender-affirming care and those who don't is clear. Kids who were able to transition either socially or medically were 73% less likely to experience suicidality compared to their peers who did not get that care. And to be clear, this care only includes puberty blockers and hormone replacement therapy. Surgeries are rarely performed on trans youth, and in all cases, it is a parental decision. And yet, despite this, 21 states have banned this care. 5 states have even made it a felony for doctors to perform this care. This despite hearing after hearing after hearing where doctors, parents, and trans kids themselves testify that what these politicians are doing is not in their best interest, nor is it supported by most doctors or medical organizations. Most of these politicians are hiding behind the excuse that this is about protecting kids. But this isn't about protecting kids, as you'll see. Here's Aaron Reed's adult risk map. As you can see, it is only slightly less red, largely because they haven't started targeting us yet. Here, unlike the risk map for trans youth, the dark red states typically don't have care bans for adults, but they do have cruel laws limiting their rights in many different ways. Kansas, Tennessee, North Dakota, and Oklahoma all have laws prohibiting the alteration of birth certificates. Kansas even has a mechanism where driver's licenses that do not have an accurate gender marker may be forcibly reverted. Trans men may have to have an F on their driver's license. These laws enable legal discrimination for trans people. I want to highlight one state in particular. See that nearly pitch black state on the southeast corner? Say hello to Florida, currently under the leadership of Ron DeSantis, one of the scariest politicians I have seen in my entire life. Under DeSantis, Florida has become a Christo-fascist hellhole, unwelcoming to anyone who is not a cisgender white male. There are many, many laws I can go over, including the state's Don't Say Gay or Trans law. But there are 2 in particular that directly affect the livelihood of every transgender person in Florida. One is the Safety in Public Spaces Act. This bans anyone from using a bathroom that doesn't match the gender they were assigned at birth. It applies to facilities such as prisons, schools, airports, city parks, anything funded or owned by the state. If you are a trans woman and you're on your way to Disney World and you go to the women's bathroom at the Orlando airport, you can be arrested and sentenced to prison just for using the women's bathroom. And prison is not a good place for trans people. They are 10 times likely to be sexually assaulted by prisoners, and 5 times more likely to be sexually assaulted by staff. The other law is known as SB 254, and it is a doozy. SB 254 imposes onerous restrictions on gender-affirming care, including HRT, which many trans people need to live. Trans people are now required to get their prescriptions from either a DO or an MD, and nobody else. Patients cannot get a prescription from a nurse practitioner, even though that was common prior to the law's passage. They cannot get prescriptions via telehealth, and they are required to sign forms laden with falsehoods just to be able to get their medically necessary care. This law functionally banned access to life-saving medications for 80% of transgender adults in the state, over 90,000 people. It is now 2024, and this assault shows no signs of stopping. 5 days into this year, with state houses just opening up, 125 anti-trans bills were filed. I'm going to repeat that number just so we're all clear. 125 anti-trans bills in 5 days. That's on pace to shatter last year's records. And it takes me to the reason I'm making the video in the first place. Ohio. Ohio's a little different because it's not a state house law, but it is very important for all of us. Ohio was one of the states that passed a gender-affirming ban for trans youth. This was vetoed by that state's governor, Mike DeWine, and initially it sounded positive, but DeWine left open room for more targeted executive proposals aimed at adults. These proposals dropped on January 4th, and they make SB 254 look tame. Under these proposed rules, all transgender people would have to have a treatment team consisting of a psychiatrist, an endocrinologist, and a bioethicist. The first 2 requirements alone place HRT out of reach for many transgender people, but the bioethicist makes care functionally impossible to obtain. Very, very, very few organizations employ a bioethicist, basically only a select number of hospitals. As clinical researcher and therapist Jessica Kant notes on her site, no infrastructure exists to provide care this way. This is, without a doubt, a de facto ban on gender-affirming care in the state. And keep in mind, I was just talking about adults here. Anyone under 21 will be subject to a 6-month review, and every gender dysphoria diagnosis will be required to be sent to the state for review, meaning that the state is creating a database of all known trans people in Ohio, something that just has grim implications no matter which way you look at it. As of this recording, the rules are still pending. We still have time to fight this. Not a lot of time, but we still have time. The Ohio Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services is seeking public comment on this bill, with a deadline of 5 p.m. on Friday, January 19th, 2024. The Ohio Department of Health is also seeking public comment. Their deadline is Monday, February 5th, 2024. If you are trans, it's time to stand up for our brothers and sisters who are under existential threat. If you are not trans, your support is even more important. These laws are part of a coordinated, comprehensive assault. Right-wing think tanks like the Heritage Foundation are helping draft these bills. The right-wing media machine has become dedicated to amplifying transphobia, from Fox News Channel to Daily Wire. There's even a push on the school board level driven by extremist organization Moms for Liberty. If these Ohio rules stand, it's almost a given that they will spread to other Republican-controlled states, fueling a public health and even an internal refugee crisis as trans people and their families are forced to uproot themselves to states that are not banning this care. And let's not delude ourselves. Republicans are chomping at the bit to restrict this care nationally if they retake the White House. Former President Trump has already spoke of day one executive orders aimed at banning care for, at the very least, transgender youth. And the Heritage Foundation has a very threatening proposal called Project 2025. And it's not just limited to curtailing trans rights. Oh no. Reproductive freedom, abortion care, and all sorts of other things are targeted. Project 2025 lays out, in detail, the transformation of the United States into a Christo-fascist dystopia. I know this has been an incredibly grim video, and if you're frightened, if you're concerned, good. I hope you are. As I said before, this is an existential threat for all transgender people, and it's time for everybody, inside the community and out, to see it for what it is and start fighting. But I don't want to end on a grim note. Speaking personally, I started medical transition in June of 2023. And that's a big reason why my videos have not had me appearing on camera. I just don't feel comfortable yet. But I've been taking selfies as a way to analyze my own ongoing changes and track my progress. I still have a long way to go, but I compared that selfie to ones I took in years prior, when I was pretending to be a guy, and I saw something really striking. My eyes. So dead, so sad in the pre-transition shots, but so alive, mischievous, happy, after just 6 months on hormone replacement therapy. That happiness is real. For the first time in years, I feel like I have a plan, a future, a life that I want to create for myself. Transitioning has given me so much, and I am making this video so I can give something back, to contribute what I can to the fight. Because this is what they want to take away. This happiness, this trans joy, they want to take it away. I'm not going to let them. We can't let them win. But we have to work together to prevent the worst case from happening. If you found this video at all insightful, please consider supporting me. I am an independent video producer who is just about to leave her job to do this full time, and I do need your support. While my normal videos are about cartoons and television history, I kind of expect to be going back to this sort of thing from time to time. So you can support me on Patreon at patreon.com/JessMatthewsProductions. You can also do a direct donation via Cash App, Venmo, or PayPal. I'm Hulky D on all 3 platforms. Like I said, this is turning into my full-time thing, and if you could just spare a little bit of a support, that would be great.